Welcome.
Thank you. I'm honored to appear in front of you folks today.
Thank you. So we will now hear the presentation of Voyageur Internet Inc. Please introduce yourself and you may begin.
Hi, my name is Jeff Klaus. I am the president and CEO of a small Indigenous internet service provider located in the Winnipeg region. I am here to represent Voyageur Internet. We are a facilities-based wireless internet service provider with a mix of commercial and residential customers. Today, we own and operate more than 60 internet broadcast sites with more than 300 distribution antennas that are located in the Winnipeg and surrounding region. Our core router went online in 1998, back in the dial-up days. Since then, our network has grown to provide ultra-high-speed services across our network. We have been buying wholesale, internet transit, and transport services from the major carriers for over 22 years. The Voyageur Internet Network has its own infrastructure that connects back to our broadcast sites from our customers and homes and businesses, connecting many thousands of Manitobans every day. We strongly urge our Canadian government to open competition by allowing all internet service providers to offer cell phone plans to our customers, as well as improve cell phone coverage area by allowing our industry to add access points to the national cell phone network. In other countries, there is more competitiveness in the cell phone industry where wireless communications service provider that does not own the wireless network infrastructure over which it provides services to its customers. I don't think I need to go into the definition of an MVNO based on the last few folks that I've heard today. And what I have heard is that it sounds like this model commercially may exist in Canada. However, from our perspective, it is not available to internet service providers that are not classified as an ILEC or a CLEC. Today, there is no clear path of how a company like Voyageur Internet would even start to negotiate with a national provider. My first request is that the MVNO model become available to all CRTC registered internet service providers with a template or set guidelines to facilitate the process. In comparison to the major carriers, most companies in our industry are very small when compared to the national cell phone providers. Most of the smaller internet service providers are more technical and do not have the administrative heft to create constructs from scratch. In that sense, we ask for your help to create good policy that all parties would be able to abide by. Moving forward to a new idea that could mutually benefit the public, the cell phone companies, as well as internet service providers. I have named the idea, for lack of a better term, reverse MVNO. There are hundreds of internet service providers with facilities that are well connected and have lots of capacity across our great nation. These facilities are already connected to the major providers. There are thousands of dead spots on the cell phone networks today, such as basements of a large number of commercial buildings, concrete parkades, industrial area buildings that are steel clad, dips and valleys in rural areas, as well as remote communities. The request is to allow internet service providers such as Voyageur to add cell phone antennas to their networks and require the national cell phone companies who own the spectrum to integrate those antennas into the national cell phone network. We are not asking the major carriers to pay for the radio's antenna or infrastructure required to transport the data to a common exchange point. We already own or lease it for the internet side of our business. The call phone data can be securely transferred between the networks using standard internet protocols, starting with a network-to-network interface. Although this is just an example how part of it could be done, today most internet service providers use network-to-network interfaces to transport data between the networks. With an MVNO alongside this new concept, the reverse MVNO model, any internet service provider would be able to offer their customers cell phone plans, as well as provide them the cell phone coverage they require in their community or business in real time. The population density of Manitoba is unique with many challenges that greatly differs from metro regions. Today, there are approximately 25 wireless service providers in this province who has built out their networks using mostly Wi-Fi based microwave technologies. By allowing us to add cell phone antennas and to fill in dead spots, our networks become part of the national network. Today, across Canada, there are more than 500 similarly sized companies that have been filling in the places left behind by the major providers in terms of providing internet. Public safety is a huge issue in our region when it comes to the national network. The emergency paging system only works on cell phones that are connected to the national network. Today, there may be private, secure Wi-Fi coverage in a number of those dead spots, but that does not help in the case of an emergency. Aside from public safety, which is the biggest concern, there are economic benefits. The emerging 5G technologies alongside with the rapid growing industry, which is called Internet of Things or IoT, should be part of the national network. There are also hundreds of small internet service providers and information technology companies that are currently deploying Wi-Fi based solutions because of their business models. With a reverse MVNO model, better technologies such as emerging 5G devices can be deployed. It is possible for this type of innovation to be provided by any of the internet service providers at a much lower cost than the national providers, as has benefits for the end users, such as improved cell phone coverage and potentially more competitive pricing. Commissioners, I really appreciate you hearing me today.
Thank you. Thank you very much for taking the time to share your submission with us. Commissioner Barron.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Klaus. Thank you very much for joining us via Skype. Thank you. I have some questions for you. I'd like to start with questions of a more general nature and then get into some more details on your reverse MVNO model.
Okay.
So to begin, you operate in Manitoba, a market which recently went through the acquisition of MTS by Bell. And I would like your views on whether the mobile wireless market in Manitoba has gotten worse or better following the acquisition.
I think that the mobile wireless... Oh, sorry, that's an echo for me. I feel that the mobile wireless network has actually improved on the same rate that it was always improving. There's a lot of holes in Manitoba, but I haven't really seen, from my perspective anyway, a lot of change. And MTS was never considered to be great at it. There were already movements with Bell putting facilities into Manitoba before that acquisition actually happened. But in terms of going in my lifetime from no cell phones to what we have today, the rate in which that's been deployed and constantly improving really hasn't changed at all.
Okay. And have you seen any changes from the newer wireless entrants such as Freedom, Videotron, and Eastlink on the competitiveness of the wireless market in general? I know not all of them are in your market, but...
None whatsoever in our market. Some of our... a few competitors in our industry that we meet regularly at the Manitoba Internet Exchange, where a lot of us have our networks connected together. We're actually commenting on how many people do we know that have plans that are not on one of the major carriers, and it still is a dominated market, and we're not seeing any difference.
Okay. And with respect to prices, certain parties in this proceeding have submitted that wireless prices have declined in recent years. And in fact, this is supported by the CRTC's own communications monitoring report. Do you believe that this decline in prices has been reflected in more competition in the market?
I wouldn't say it has done anything for competition in the market because there's no new competition in the market in terms of cell phone.
Okay, fair enough. And now specifically with respect to Manitoba, in your submission, you indicated that the population density in the Manitoba region was unique and that there were specific challenges that differentiated it from the metro regions. Could you elaborate on this a bit? What specifically are the challenges and why are they unique to Manitoba?
Well, in the metro regions, and I know this even from my own travels, you go into even whether it be a downtown region or an urban region, you go to visit people in their homes and you go into the into the basement, and there's no issue with your cell phone coverage. I'd say that where I'm sitting right now in my home in Winnipeg, if I were to go 10 feet down, I would not be able to have this conversation. So, and that's pretty much a very common thing that happens throughout the urban center. You get into the rural center, it really is going to depend on the tree coverage and what your rural property looks like, if you're any dips, and maybe you have to spend $10,000, $15,000 on a small tower and put a cell phone repeater to get service into your property. And, you know, those are the types of solutions that are happening out there, requiring the end consumer to be spending, and only a limited number of consumers that could afford to be spending that type of dollars to get cell phone service into their home or operations.
And do you believe this is because of a lack of appropriate infrastructure, or is it geography or
well, there's a lack of infrastructure, but I'm not going to try to make an argument that it's easy to fulfill and get the full coverage. I mean, the amount of investment that any company would have to make is huge, and you know, therefore there ends up being a lot of holes in an area like ours that has population, and the population literally is on every square acre of the rural areas throughout Manitoba where we have towers, aside from being inside of Winnipeg. And there's a lot of those properties where our technicians, they don't get service unless they're up on the roof with our antenna, where we're pointing back to our tower as well. So there's very little coverage when you get into the homes, the places that people need it. And, you know, I do also feel that the cell phone companies haven't been neglectful in building out infrastructure. It's just that the pace that it's going on, based on the investment that we see into Manitoba, it's going to be a very long time until we have full coverage. And then even with that, though, it still doesn't give us the type of access to the emerging 5G technologies to start planning our technology rollouts, rather than what I'm going to call not as good Wi-Fi technology, where we could already be working on 5G and having devices and sensors and everything that are being put into buildings and infrastructure throughout the province that are Wi-Fi based, and people want to work with the companies they want to work with, not necessarily the large carriers, and the prices are a lot better. Even on the bandwidth side versus cell phone versus what we do on our network, when I hear the discrepancies in bandwidth, I mean, it's a 20th or better than that for the cost. If you're on Wi-Fi on our network in someone's office, as soon as you leave that office, you're paying 20 times the amount of money for access and bandwidth. So there are a lot of opportunities for us as we're a very small company, but we do innovate. We've been innovating since the late 90s, and we feel strongly that there's room in the cell phone network. To us, it's just a matter of radio and spectrum and wireless, and having deployed the number of access points and wireless that we've done. We want to be able to allow it to participate. We're also not asking to technically interfere with antennas that are currently deployed by the major carriers. We know when you have no signal, and so we know where things need to be deployed. In terms of cost sharing, that could be a difficult conversation. I understand where people get into saying, well, let's take a look at only ILEC and CLEC model for security and other reasons. There's billing key platforms and other things that make it easy for billing to happen at those levels, but unfortunately that excludes more companies that it includes. That'll include 50, I don't know what the number is, but 50 CLECs versus 500 internet service providers that have invested in infrastructure in a regime for the past 20 years that's been facilities based. So literally billions of dollars have invested into 500 networks that are small networks across this country, but we're still not allowed to participate in the national network because there's no way that any of us could afford to ever participate in spectrum. So
specifically with this model, this reverse MVNO model that you're proposing, is the model hinged on networks that are already existing that you are proposing would be interconnected with the networks of the national MNOs? I'm just trying to understand what the model is.
There are new networks being built in Manitoba that are not owned by any of the major carriers. fiber being pulled, towers being built, delivering things, and there's a huge demand to be able to put cell phone infrastructure on those facilities that are owned by the people putting them up. Whether it be Voyageur or whether it be a number of First Nations up in northern Manitoba would be some good examples as well. The model doesn't preclude new people entering in because there will be new small networks that will pop up that will, and the other part of this, just to pause that thought, is the interconnection piece, is that pretty much all small internet service providers have to buy a form of transport or transit to facilitate getting their traffic out to what is the internet, or what is an edge to the network. For example, in Winnipeg here, pretty much our edge is considered Shaw in Alberta and a bit in Toronto. But the customers need to be communicating with what is considered to be the internet. So we have all of our own transport and interconnects, the network-to-network interfaces that already exist and can already facilitate secure data transfer over them through other protocols. And I don't want to get into technical things because lots of people have different ideas on what technologies to do it with, but it can be done. And there's more than one way to be able to do that, and to be done securely, which I understand there are security issues. So when I look at our network, and we already comply to all of the ISED regulations that we have on our network and our towers and our infrastructure, I believe that it's to everybody's benefit. And this is not in opposition to the major carriers. This is, I have a network, I can put up an access point. Instead of spending $3 million, maybe I'll spend $15,000 and I can share in a bit of revenue. And that allows for innovation, lower expenses for the major carriers, even to go so far to say if they realize there's an area where they have plans in the future to build a tower, they put that tower up, which means that this antenna that was added is no longer needed. That's great, because all the devices that I wanted connected are connected. So that's where the MVNO model comes in, to make sure that I have plans that I can do with my customers that are on the cell phone network, not just for the cell phones, but for the emerging IoT market.
I see. On the issue of investment, it's been suggested in this proceeding that an MVNO model would reduce the incentive for the carriers to continue to invest in infrastructure. What are your views on this? Do you believe that this is something that the Commission should be concerned about?
Maybe some of that investment might move to my company.
Well, I think the argument.
I don't think you lose investment. Is my point. There's still a demand and a need for the technologies that are emerging on our planet, and one way or another, people and humans will make them happen. Which is even why a company like mine exists. That growing up as a kid, I worked a lot with MTS folks through my high school, through science fair projects, through all kinds of other things, and the whole culture changed when the government sold it, and the whole entire telecom culture has turned into something very different than it was when I was growing up as a kid. I believe that if it had evolved into something great, there would only be two major providers, and that would be super. But they don't behave, and that's quite, just speaking frankly, it's very anti-competitive. At the same time, I buy services from them, and have been for 22 years at reasonable rates that have been commercially negotiated outside of regulation. So, but at this point, we've asked all of the carriers over the last 10 years in many different ways through many different organizations to somehow participate in the cell phone networks to solve problems and getting networks out to where we need them. And there's just no real way for us to do that, which is why I wrote to you guys in the first place.
Thank you. So you're telling me that you have tried to negotiate with the existing carriers to have this kind of interconnection with your services. Can you tell me a little bit more about how these discussions with the carriers went, or how far you got in terms of trying to get some kind of agreement?
It seems like you meet with somebody, and then you meet with a different person, and then you meet with a different person, and you start talking about and asking questions, and none of the questions in terms of how you would actually do it get answered, and it just sort of fizzles out. And there's no direct person to talk to. There's no format in which to be able to approach them. I don't necessarily. I think that they're going, no, I don't want to do it, but they don't have anything within their organization built or whatnot to be able to facilitate the request even. And in a technology world, when you go to any of the major carriers and you're requesting, for an example, a specific 10 gigabit, I don't want to get into all the 10 technical things. If you get one letter in it wrong, they'll deliver exactly what you asked them for and nothing different. And they won't advise you that you maybe could have ordered something better for your company or otherwise. So you better make sure that when you put in your service request that you're signing a 5-year contract on, that you know exactly what it is that you're buying. So without knowing exactly what it is to request from them in terms of an MVNO model, there's no way to even put in a request. So you end up talking with salespeople to a director to different people at some of the shows where TELUS or other companies put up displays and booths to talk to people, and they're friendly and they seem to want to do things, but it just never seems to go anywhere.
Thank you. I think there's kind of two pieces to your proposal. There's the MVNO proposal, which is under discussion in this proceeding, and there's the piece about interconnecting the physical infrastructure with the existing infrastructure of the carriers. On that part, the Commission has forborne from regulation and from rate regulation in that area. And there isn't any evidence on the record that would allow the Commission to deforbear from regulating that service. So technically, this is something that could be done under the existing framework. I note in your opening comments that you're asking for a template, you're asking for guidelines. Can you be more specific about what it is that you suggest the Commission can do to help in this respect?
Well, just, having only really tuned in to the discussions today, since there's many days of this going on, based on, I'm sorry, can you repeat that just so I make sure that I'm responding properly?
Yes. So the part that is about interconnecting with the existing carriers is an area that is already open to negotiation between the parties. So the Commission does not regulate that. My question to you is, I understand that you have not been able to have fruitful negotiations with the carriers, and it appears that you're asking for some kind of framework or a guideline to move your proposal forward. So I was looking for more specifics on what you think the Commission could do.
Well, I can only speak from practical terms, and I've listened to a lot of folks talk at much more academic levels than I really can make comment to. So in practical terms, it would be we identify, whether it be through a landlord, a government, a municipality, a First Nation, certain types of coverage areas that are lacking, and whether it be any of the ones that I mentioned before, and the ability to be able to simply go to a carrier that you have an agreement that you're going to have an MVNO model with, or you have this reverse model set up with saying, when we're going to do this, then once you've identified where a microcell or an antenna should go, there should be a verification process that can take less than 3 days in order to be able to turn around and say, that maybe there's a problem with our cell phone network. We can turn up the power at the tower, and we can cover you. Or no, we can't provide coverage at that area. So proceed with a microcell that gives this much power output that won't interfere with our network, based on some sort of preset criteria of equipment that's based on technical specifications for broadcast, signal strength and other things. even if you have a common anybody's cell phone, you can go in there, and at the top of it where it has your little signal strength, you can change that to exactly how many decibels are connected. And when you lose connectivity, you can see that clearly as you walk into some of these places or drive into them, that you either have no connectivity or some. So there are literally thousands of these locations that have been identified that we would like to address in a practical sense.
Thank you. I think I may ask our legal team to give some guidance on whether the Commission actually has jurisdiction in that area. And I guess beyond that, are you aware of any reverse MVNO models in the sense that you are describing that exist elsewhere?
No.
At this point, I don't have any more questions. I may turn it over to my colleagues who may want some clarification.
Commissioner Levy?
Thank you very much for answering my questions, Mr. Klaus.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Commissioner Joanne Levy, and my territory is Saskatchewan and Manitoba. What communities does Voyageur Internet cover?
We have Winnipeg, all of the RMs that surround it, and all the way down to the U.S. border from Winnipeg and over to the Ontario border, totaling, I think that there's over 200 small communities that are part of my current coverage area. And we also have a lot of conversations that happen with First Nations up north with respect to the networks that they're either building or want to build with their isolation.
Okay. And how many, you said literally thousands of Manitobans. And how is the internet service delivered to them? And what sort of speed is it?
We have plan choices that go from 5 to 55 meg downloads across our network, except for a few places where we can't deliver that bandwidth at this time until we do some upgrades. But for the most part, we have up to 55 meg download, which is your mandate for people to have for that. And we've been already delivering that for the most part on our network for the past 2 years. And we deliver this using unlicensed wireless spectrum. So we're very good at wireless. There's a lot of interference. And we've built technologies over the past 15 years to mitigate all the different interference. Every 2 years, we're upgrading to new radios, keeping up with all the different speeds and all the different technologies that are out there. We also have a patent pending for the past 5 years on a tower technology for rapid deployment of 5G technologies that we've been working on as well as part of our technology, because it's the same form factor as what we're currently doing today with the lesser desirable Wi-Fi technologies.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate your participation today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We do indeed appreciate you taking the time to participate by Skype or any other way, and for your interest in the proceeding. With that, we will adjourn for the day. We'll resume tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Madam Secretary?
9 a.m. tomorrow morning. Have a nice evening.
Have a wonderful evening, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you again. Bye. Good night.
Bye.